A Star is Burns versus the Springfield Files, the Simpsons crossover battle of the 90s. Jay Sherman going head to head with Agents Mulder and Scully. Both are great crossover episodes, but I can only choose one. Which is the better episode? Today, I have a very special Simpsons Showdown for you. Normally in these, you get to hear me talking to myself for 15 minutes, almost like I'm a confused Mr. Burns in the condiments aisle, but this time we're looking at two crossover episodes. So what better way to tackle them but by having two guests enter the debate arena and lay out the arguments. Please welcome Tariq from the ToonrificTariq channel, who will be arguing for A Star is Burns, and Lydia from the Simpsons Theory, who will be making the case for the Springfield Files. Both Tariq and Lydia make really awesome content covering animation in The Simpsons, so if you're not familiar with their work, I recommend checking them out. I mean, they each put together an entire argument for this thing on their own, so please show them some love. So here's how today's showdown's gonna work. Tariq and Lydia will lay out the cases for each of their episodes, and then I'll follow up with my usual deliberations and make a final verdict. This is legitimately a toss-up for me, so these arguments could very well tip the scales. I also accept bribes. As always, we'll start with the episode that aired first. So this is the case for A Star is Burns.
Oh man, I smell another cheap YouTube crossover. And I don't know how Jim does this. I'm not equipped enough to not start these with like copyrighted clips. Hi, I am ToonrificTariq, head of the Offbeat Kiki fan club, Family Guy apologist, and resident Marge Simpson stan. Of these two episodes, I do believe A Star is Burns to be the stronger entry in the series. And no, it's not because there's more Marge in it. I like to believe that I'm a lot less biased than that. Of course, just because you like to believe something doesn't mean that it's true. A Star is Burns is a superior episode because there are more jokes. Like, okay, I didn't get out a stopwatch or anything to make this observation. It's just more from experience. But this episode, man, it just goes a mile a minute. I definitely forgot how funny it was. It feels like the episode never stops moving or trying to be hilarious. There's so many jokes that it's actually possible to laugh over a joke during your first watch. And there's so much classic stuff. The McBain stuff, Marge writing Homer asking if he has a pimple or a boil in her letter to Jay Sherman while also writing, "Look what you made me write." And me personally, it cracks me up every time Senior Spielbergo calls Mr. Burns El Diablo. But the episode's so silly, it's so carefree. I don't think the word to describe the comedy in the Springfield Files is grounded. After all, there's freaking aliens in this thing. But I do feel like a lot of its jokes are a lot more structured, a lot more focused. It feels more like making fun of specific things or focusing on its parody. And while I do think that kind of stuff is fine, especially when the entire episode is framed as a farce like it is here, I will admit that there's more variety here, there's more fun. They play a lot more closely to these characters' personalities and how they all work in this situation. Both stories are framed as if it's about the town, but A Star is Burns actually uses the town. Like, it's a lot of fun to see all the films that everyone comes with, whereas you don't really get as many reactions to a possible alien invasion in the Springfield Files. It kind of zeroes in on Homer and makes the town more like a mob, which is fine, you know, that is kind of what Springfield does best. But what I like about A Star is Burns is that it doesn't feel like you're cheated out of any interactions or that anything overstays its welcome. And not for nothing, the films are great. Flanders, Moe, Barney, Mole Man. The ball? His groin? You kidding? It works on so many levels. And the episode doesn't feel bloated either, or that it's going off the rails. In fact, it's relentlessly fun. And not to mention Jay's appearance in the episode, he's great the whole way through. They do a great job reintroducing his character while keeping him true to what he was like in the original. Maybe. I don't know, it's been a while. But that's the thing though, right? A Star is Burns is the superior episode because the episode knows it's a crossover. And it's not to say that the other one doesn't, but throughout the episode there's so many jokes about that fact alone. Hell, I even opened this section with one of them. Not only that, but they use Jay and Homer's contrasting personalities to great effect. Homer's arc in the episode about feeling inadequate in his own home because of Jay's presence is brilliantly woven into the story. because it's all told through jokes and it's loose enough to be worked around and not feel as though it's coming off as hollow or rushed. You're so busy laughing that you don't realize that he's going through something until he has to sit down and evaluate the films. They really do try to do it under your nose, and it works. It really works. Both episodes kind of have arcs like this, and both kind of pay off as treating them as no big deal. But I found myself appreciating this one more because it frames itself as a funny romp throughout the town, but secretly tells you something about Homer's insecurities. All in all, he just wants to be respected. Is that too much to ask? Yes. I think I'm only allowed 3 points for this thing. When watching both of these, I kind of had to do it twice to fully get a grasp on what they both do different with their storytelling to make them distinct, and I think I got it. And one thing about the Springfield Files is that it's different. It kind of sticks out when you step back and look at the early years of the series. Simply put, A Star is Burns is the better episode because it's still an episode of The Simpsons. Alright, so full disclosure. The first time I saw this one, I didn't even know what the critic was. It had been off the air for maybe a decade at the time. And I'm not alone in that, I hear people say this kind of stuff all the time about this episode. Even though this episode was to springboard the critic onto Fox, the show didn't exactly last long afterwards. It has its cult following, but it's nowhere near as popular as The Simpsons. But they still managed to create a new story and introduce a new character into this world that still stands on its own 2 feet. You can watch this episode with literally no prior knowledge of the critic, and Homer's arc still works, the jokes are still hilarious, and Jay doesn't even chew up the scenery. While with the Springfield Files, you can definitely enjoy it without having seen the original show, absolutely so. It just dances around really heavily into parody territory. Its format is modeled after the original show. So while something like the stilted deliveries is relentlessly hilarious to fans of the show, it probably wouldn't be as funny to casuals. I don't think it's the alien stuff per se, but these characters, the music, the text on screen, nothing like this is normal for the show. It feels like The Simpsons had to morph itself to fit the X-Files, while The Simpsons and the critic fit together seamlessly. They don't have to change anything or break any rules. They just drop Jay in the middle of Springfield and let the rest happen. With that, my argument for A Star is Burns is closed. Whatever Lydia says, I'm sure she's not going to insult the episode. She's not booing, she's just saying boo earns. Or maybe she's booing, I don't know, we recorded these things like a few weeks apart. Thanks for having me again, Jims. And hey, if you ever want to come and visit my show...
Nah, we're not gonna be doing that.
So, when I was told that I'll be fighting in the corner for Season 8, The Springfield Files, I was pretty elated. Yes, A Star is Burns is undeniably a great episode. It shows a glimpse into Springfield's creative side, and although A Football in the Groin has a football in the groin, I feel that The Springfield Files is an infinitely better episode. So let me tell you why. Guest stars. So let's discuss guest stars as our starting point, because The Springfield Files starts with a pretty monumental one. The episode opens with Leonard Nimoy as our narrator. The following tale of alien encounters is true, and by true I mean false. From his hilarious deadpan delivery to wrapping his arms around a nuclear reactive Mr. Burns, his moments are only made more funnier and more memorable because of his limited screen time. Unlike a certain Jay Sherman who almost monopolizes the entire episode. Let's also talk about Agent Scully and Mulder, who form the basis and theme for the entire episode. From the signature 90s sci-fi soundtrack to location credits at the bottom of our TV screens, these are all subtleties that elevate this episode into a really thoughtful sci-fi one. The duo perform as they would in the show, straight and to the point, but they allow themselves to be poked fun at, stating that in their world, investigating possible/impossible alien sightings is way more important than drugs and illegal weapon smuggling. Overall, I feel that the Simpsons creators have chosen the perfect participants to make it into a well thought out sci-fi Simpsons episode. Leonard Nimoy sets the tone and provides the structure of the episode, while Scully and Mulder are the fuel to showcase Springfield's crazy side by comparing them to their straight but well written performances. And come on, even Marvin the Martian, Gort, Chewbacca and Alf provide a fun appearance too. But let's not be mistaken, as the guest stars don't actually overtake the entire episode, unlike Jay Sherman, who totally distracts us from the actual Springfieldians, who I think are almost used as a prop to react to his words and to be in awe of his awards, whilst he's awkwardly trying to outshine Homer in every way, whilst he conducts unintelligent burping competitions, leaving our protagonist's nose firmly out of joint. There's a certain arrogance to Jay Sherman which I always found a bit distracting. I think this actually links back to the actual context of the episode, where Groening even said that it was a cheap advertisement for Jay Sherman's show The Critic. Oh yeah, this was a show that two Simpsons creators actually made themselves. Were they trying to make Sherman seem more superior to our beloved Yellow family in order to encourage audiences to go over and watch The Critic instead? To me personally, it kinda seems that way. The narrative. So let's not be blinded by the stars, this episode also carries a good solid structure that surpasses A Star Is Born's. As Homer embarks on a drunken maiden voyage home, he stumbles into a typically spooky forest, which is ignited with a dramatic 1960s psycho soundtrack. Cleverly introduced as a violinist is dropped off by the Springfield Philharmonic Orchestra bus, which is a hilarious gag. He then comes face to face with the glowing mystique that is Mr. Burns, accompanied by the X-Files iconic theme music. This elevates The Simpsons beyond burping jokes and characters simply being hit in the groin by a football. Sorry, Mole Man. This iconic scene with a nuclear luminescent Burns has stayed in the minds of fans for years. It could be screenshotted and placed on the wall at the Tate Modern. beautiful. From here, the story just goes up and up, from Homer being doubted and judged by the entire town and his family, to the integration of Scully and Mulder to further investigate the story. This results in further doubt and Homer's dope t-shirts, which I really want. In the end, I like that it's Bart who helps him uncover the truth, resulting in a big penultimate reveal, before ending with the entire town singing "Good Morning, Sunshine." This story has drama, nostalgia, pop references, an underdog story, and a musical number all rolled into one. And Leonard Nimoy. Number 3, the jokes. The other huge asset to further in this episode, ahead of A Star Is Born's, is the raw comedy. It's gag after gag after gag. In the opening sequence, we not only get witty lines from Nimoy, but Homer proves himself to be a master of deception by playing an old VCR of himself, Carl and Lenny from the 70s in order to trick Mr. Burns. One line that I can pick out that I think is really funny and just really pure is when drunk Homer discusses his finer opinions on candy. When he says blue M&M, red M&M, they all wind up the same colour in the end. Wiggum's also given his time to shine by grouping together crazy boozy alien encounters with arsonists, typing them up on his invisible computer. Not forgetting the Mulder and his Speedos reference, Moe smuggling his whale across Springfield, and the entire process that it takes Mr. Burns to become a lovable alien, which encapsulates how the entire episode is a conveyor belt of comedy. So this is my conclusion. Overall, I feel that I've gone over the 3 main points that make this episode a standout one within the entire series. The story is solid, with an arc and a structure that makes it hard to forget. It's jam-packed full of jokes and homages. And I feel that it's these references, including Star Trek, Star Wars, Psycho, and The X-Files, that solidified this episode with a real mysterious sci-fi theme, with the star music and visuals to match, bringing it together in a neat little package. A Star Is Born's has iconic moments, sure, but the Springfield Files from start to finish belongs in an elite few episodes where everything just works. And if you don't agree, then just like Agent Scully said, I don't have time for your convenient ignorance. P.S. There's a reason why Sherman is locked up in a mental institution. It stinks. You said it, Jay. I'm Lydia. Good night, and keep watching the skis. Oh, sorry, skies.
Based on those arguments, I can already tell this is going to be a super close call. I found myself nodding along to both of these cases like the most agreeable juror ever. With A Star Is Born's, I really connect up with what Tariq said about its carefree attitude and the density of its jokes. There isn't much plot here. It's one of those classic examples of just setting up a premise and then riffing on it for a while. Let's get everyone together for a meeting. Now let's show them filming movies. Now let's watch the final products. They're packing in the jokes here. They really do almost land on top of each other. Of course, the downside of this carefree attitude is that there are a few more stinkers among the jokes in comparison to the Springfield Files. That Seinfeld joke is particularly sweaty. Still, I would contend that A Star is Burns has higher highs in the jokes departments, with tons of iconic and quotable lines throughout. The crossover factor, I feel somewhat mixed about. I agree with Tariq in that it feels more like a Simpsons episode than the other one. That they're dropping Jay Sherman into the typical Springfield storyline. You don't necessarily need to know anything about the critic to enjoy it. But I agree with Lydia that Jay dominates the story, that he's such a focal point in Homer's storyline that an unfamiliar audience will feel like they're missing something. Jay Sherman has a bit of that awkward Poochie energy to him, you know? The writers were clearly aware of this, hence all the fantastic meta-commentary. So while the format is very much The Simpsons, his presence makes for an odd fit. The Springfield Files instead goes for a format homage, between all the X-Files and Leonard Nimoy stuff. As Tariq pointed out, it doesn't feel like the typical Simpsons episode. It's more akin to stuff like the 138th episode Spectacular. That being said, I agree with Lydia that it results in there being more variety here. It's not just film parodies and Jay Sherman, they use the format to deliver a legitimately mysterious and captivating Homer journey. We get to see what Friday nights are like in Springfield. We get a peek into his relationship with Marge, a nice moment of Bart supporting his father. Then the spectacle of the crowd in Act 3. These are both episodes I remember watching as a child, but I vividly remember the first time I saw that green glowing figure emerge from the forest. I can't think of many Simpsons episodes with this sense of atmosphere. I also really like what Lydia said about Mulder and Scully being such good foils for Springfield nonsense. In A Star is Burns, it kind of feels like all the silliness would happen whether Jay were there or not. But Mulder and Scully showing up, we get these character reactions. Marge freaking out, Moe and his whale, obviously Homer plays off them well. Come back here, turtle. The downside of this approach is that the story does feel more disjointed. This thing weaves through an X-Files parody, then pretends like the story is over, and then finishes with the Leonard Nimoy stuff. A Star is Burns sometimes has its jokes tripping over each other, whereas here it's the formats doing it. Fitting in two genre parodies and a Homer-Marge conflict is a pretty tall order. It gets there in a weird way, but it does result in a bigger climax to the story and a sweeter Homer-Marge resolution. Really tough call here. The Springfield Files has heart, but A Star is Burns has a football in the groin. However, if I had to choose only one of these episodes, I think I would go with A Star is Burns. Going with my gut here. Obviously a matter of personal taste, but I think A Star is Burns is the funnier episode overall. It's just so damn quotable. I don't care if it strikes out sometimes, it hits so many home runs that I want it on my roster. The Springfield Files very nearly overcame this disadvantage for me because I really do value its sense of atmosphere and mystery. You all know I'm a sucker for character relationship stuff, and the Springfield Files has more of the warm fuzzies. However, I don't think it's significantly deeper than A Star is Burns in the end. Like, this sweet moment between Homer and Marge never quite lands for me because it's such a plot-driven episode. The Homer-Marge dynamic gets relatively less screen time. It walks the line between being a big Springfield hysteria story and a character relationship one, and it falls somewhere in the middle. I think if either aspect hit harder in the end, they locked one of those aspects down, I'd be voting for the Springfield Files. So that's where I landed on this one. A Star is Burns is the superior episode. But I think Lydia laid out a pretty compelling argument why I'm wrong. Honestly, after I would listen to Tariq and Lydia's individual arguments, I'd find myself changing my mind. I kept ping-ponging back and forth between them. I want to give a huge thanks to both Tariq and Lydia for putting together these episode write-ups. It's gotta be weird when some internet weirdo knocks on your door asking for a couple pages on a Simpsons episode, and they really stepped up to the plate. Go check out their YouTube channels. I have left links in the video description. As always, let me know in the comments how you would have voted in this scenario. Are you booing me right now, or are you saying boo earns? Maybe we should just settle on accepting that the truth is out there. Whichever Simpsons reference you want to go with, let your voice be heard. But for now, this case is closed.